Hello, everyone. I'm Anna Dimitchik. This is Laws of Achievement, and my guest is Stella Guan. Stella is a founder and CEO of a design school, Path Unbound. She also has a very entertaining YouTube channel documenting her digital nomad lifestyle between the US, Europe, and Asia. When I first met Stella about 10 years ago, she was an international student from China. Just a few years later, she received what's known as the Einstein visa. Throughout this decade, Stella and I touch base once in a while, and I got to learn bits and pieces of her journey. Today, I can't wait to hear all of the details. If you enjoy what you hear, like, share, subscribe, comment, ask questions. We're all here to learn and improve. Hi, Stella. Great to have you here.
Hi, Anna.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Long time no see.
Exactly. I don't know. I don't remember how long, but it's been a while. Yeah.
It's, yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, can't wait to hear your story. And I do have a whole lot of questions.
hmm
Um, I think before we get into the actual immigration experience, I want to ask you, how did you end up in the United States out of all countries?
Yeah, that's a good question because believe it or not, I didn't expect to land in the United States myself. That sounds interesting. Probably sounds interesting to some people because a lot of people, they want to have the American dream. America is their first choice. America was not even on my radar at first. So I actually wanted to move to the UK because of a very childish dream of being in the land of Harry Potter. So exactly. So as a middle school child, I wanted to study abroad, and I realized the UK is very expensive, and my family does not have the financial resources. So one day, my mother presented a newspaper to me. The newspaper featured a story of a local girl who got accepted to 12 universities in the US with full scholarships. So she said to me, well, if you could be like her, you could go. And I said, well, you know what? I'm going to be exactly like her. So I thought, okay, if I couldn't go to the UK, why don't I pick the US? Because it's close enough. And because it speaks English, it's a big country. And I just want to get out there and experience life. So I actually changed my preparation, my trajectory. I started preparing for SATs, for all these exams that geared towards the US. And very lucky, I got the scholarship that I needed to go to the US. And that's how I landed in the US.
And how many places did you apply to get the scholarship?
I think I probably applied to, I don't know, 8 to 10 places. Not that many compared to a lot of people. Yeah.
That's a lot of effort, certainly.
Yeah. Well, because I know that if I don't get a scholarship, I don't get to go. So it's my only chance. And
Right.
I was actually very strategic when I applied because I did research on all the schools. If they don't provide at least 50% scholarships, I do not apply. So I only selected schools that I have a chance. And I know that, some schools that are really prestigious, they could give you a full scholarship, but I, I played it safe. I actually selected schools that are not so prestigious, but they provide maximum amount of scholarships. So I was very intentional about it.
Wow. And was your family really supportive about you going to another country to study?
Well, they would prefer that I didn't, but I think they're the type of parents who are very supportive, and I feel very lucky because they wanted me to be happy. I think that's the main thing. They wouldn't strongly suggest that I go, but if this is what I wanted to do, they supported it. Yeah.
That's amazing. Was it meant to be a long-term thing, or did you think you would just go, study, come back?
Well, it was always meant to be a long-term thing. Well, see, I love China. It's a great country, and I'm sure all immigrants have the same stories. They love their home country, or sometimes, although they love their home countries, there are situations that they force them to leave. In my situation, nothing was forcing me to leave, but I always knew that I have an explorer spirit since I was a child because I was so curious about the outside world. And I was I was a child that was very curious. I was critical. So this type of mindset doesn't always fit in with the, let's say, collectivism society that's common in East Asia. So I thought I want to find a society that's more welcoming to different type of personalities, different type of ideas. So yeah, I guess, I had it planned that it was going to be a long-term thing. Yeah.
So you knew you did not belong where you were born
Yes.
the whole
Yeah,
time.
exactly.
Okay, yeah, and I read a few things on it. Like I did some research. I researched the blog a little bit,
Mhm.
some really interesting pieces there, and let me read a little bit something from it. Right, so you're writing, growing up in a small town in China, Guangxi Autonomous Region, I never felt that I had anything in common with the women in my family. As a child, I was defiant, ambitious, fiercely independent, and more than anything else, I prided myself to be different. I thought I was one of a kind. Where did that attitude come from? How did
You
you
know
know
what?
you were one of a kind?
Exactly. I think it came from my mother,
Hmm.
ironically, because it's very interesting because my mother is very traditional, but she's also full of personalities. Like she has such a character. Um, if there's something it's not right, she would stand up for herself. She's always encouraged me to stand up for myself. So she has a bit of that fiery temperament that I inherited, right? So although I'm not a copy of my mother, I think that type of, attitude, I guess it I don't know what the right word is. It got carried on by me. And I think as a child, in the very beginning, my mother said, when you were less than a year old, we asked you to say hello to all the relatives and friends who came to visit you. And somehow you said no. I think it started just at the very beginning. If I don't feel like doing something, I guess I would just say no. So I
Defined
think I
from
was
birth,
born
huh?
with it. Yeah.
You were born with it. Right,
Yep.
and that's what you're also right, that there wasn't really a word in Chinese for girls like me. If there was, it would probably be the dreadful buguai, a word to describe children who dare to defy their parents,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah, because our culture values obedience and obeying the rules and respecting elders, right? If you dare to say no to an elder even though they're wrong, you're committing the moral sin, which I did at less than a year old.
Do you feel it's stricter for the girls than for the boys, or is it about the same for everyone?
I'd say it's definitely stricter for girls, but I would say collectively, our society teaches us to be good citizens, to not question a lot of things. So I don't think there's a stark contrast, but probably a little heavier on the girls.
That's very interesting. Were
Mhm.
there any other cultural norms that you defied from the age of one or before, as far as you know?
Well, I mean, I think it's always the fact that I feel, okay, not always following what other people tell me to do, even though I've never broken the law, for any society. But within, any kind of society, you have unspoken rules, right? You also have things that people just do. It's not like you have to do it, but people normally do it. So those kind of things that I usually question when I was very little. For example, when I was in middle school, everybody joined, a particular organization, let's say, that they're expected to join. And when they asked me, "Oh, do you want to join?" I said, "No, I don't." Just because everybody else joined, I don't feel compelled to join. But imagine most people would feel the peer pressure, right? Alone. It doesn't matter who you are. If everybody else is in there, most people feel like they should do that same thing. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, and so your contrarian attitude and your one of a kind thinking, do you feel that it helped you when you just started your immigration journey or not?
It
Or like what were
yeah,
your impressions?
it
Yeah?
absolutely did and still does to a very large extent because when you're doing something like immigration, you have to be brave because there's so many things that's not going to go right. And also you have to fight for yourself all the time, right? So if you're not strong mentally, then you're going to crack at some point. If life throws curveballs at you and then you back off, then you're not going to move forward. It definitely helped me with my immigration journey, and it helped me with my business journey as well. And I believe that it will keep helping me in the future chapters of my life. So yeah.
Hmm. Can you describe a couple examples where things really did not go right and you had to
Mhm.
straighten things out?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like in the process of immigration, there's so many things that could go wrong. For example, perhaps something that should have been submitted didn't get submitted, right? And then you received a result that's
Hmm.
less than ideal, or you missed a deadline. I feel like in my case, there are a few incidents of of that happened. Sometimes beyond my control. Sometimes I was not informed of certain processes. Then I think I really usually launch into this problem solving mindset. I don't spend too much time dwelling on the negative aspect of things. I'm human too, so I do get upset. I do feel disappointed, but at the same time, I remind myself, what's my goal? My goal is this. So if I spend more time dwelling on negative emotions, I'm not going to achieve it, right? So I then think outside of the box. What else can be done? What else can I do to make this right? So I think this attitude also helps a lot in anything else that I do. It's really the problem solving mindset, the mindset that I'm not going to accept that this is not happening until I've tried everything, absolutely everything that I can.
And it's probably a lot of sink or swim going on there, right? Because if you don't get it done,
Mhm.
then everything comes crashing down and it's
Exactly.
going to be catastrophic and
A
all your
lot is
investments of the previous
at
years.
stake. Exactly. Yeah. Remember, I was laid off one summer when I was 26, I think. It was a very nerve wracking summer because I had 60 days, a ticking time bomb to, revert.
Hmm.
And I got a job offered with visa sponsorship the very last week. And I had gone through, by that time, 40 interviews within 2 months. And every interview that I went through, I think it's just, it feels like, okay, my possibility is dwindling. It was very nerve wracking. But I think, I still didn't have a plan B at that time.
Hmm.
I'm not someone who has a plan B until I cross the bridge. I'll think of something else. so, so that's how I roll. Yeah.
Right. And for the viewers, right, you were talking about the time when you were on H-1B,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so when you get laid off, it's a grace period, 60-day grace period for you to find a new job, right? And at that time,
Exactly.
you were not yet on the way to the Einstein visa,
No.
which is something I want to discuss just a little bit later, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so before we dive into that, what were the major challenges besides the mental pressure to keep the job, to keep your status? What were the major challenges in the first, let's say, 2-3 years of your immigration journey?
I would say the first 2 3 years was, the most challenging aspect is, first of all, you have to get, your work done, right? And then the second thing is, at the same time, I was trying to look for a pathway to
Hmm.
be more permanent. And it was not immediately clear. It was very difficult because there aren't a lot of options in the US
Yeah.
besides marriage. Getting permanent residency through work is just very challenging. So at first, I just didn't know what to do. And even doing the day-to-day works, trying to be a good employee was hard enough, right? Because there are a lot of
Right.
expectations already. So I think, just navigating, okay, what are my options? What are my options that are realistic in the first, I would say, first year, 2 and 3? That was the most challenging. Yeah.
Hmm. And when you say being a good employee, like both from my own experience and from the people I talk to, because I am I'm an immigration lawyer, right? And I've been practicing immigration for quite some time. I noticed that a lot of times it's not enough to be a good employee. You have to be 3 times better than
Yeah.
everybody else in
Yeah.
order to receive sponsorship and to continue with
Exactly.
the employer sponsoring you, right?
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
and all of that in a foreign language. How was that for you? Like, did you have a lot of pressure from having to speak English and operate in English?
Luckily, for me, it wasn't because
Hmm.
I have been fluent for a long time. But I did see my peers have, a lot of them have gone through trouble in this department because I mean, a lot of them they're fluent, but they do have a very heavy accent. So it means that they can't always communicate in the best way with everybody. And not to mention that some people are not completely fluent. So that's definitely an extra level of hurdle, right, to their immigration journey. For me, it's never been a problem. So I'm very thankful for that. But the other thing that you mentioned, I think it's very true. It's not enough to be good. You have to be better. You have to be much better, right? Because most places don't want you because you come with an extra baggage. Who wants someone with baggage? No one, right? So I feel like in my personal experience, most of the time when I got the job with the visa sponsorship, it's because someone in the company, usually the hiring manager, saw something in me. They like me,
Hmm.
regardless of my baggage. And I think it's really that really cool personal professional connection that helps me, get there. So really I would say it definitely has a matter of luck.
Right. And you also mentioned the hiring manager, right? How much of that is actually the personal connection when you meet with the person and you feel that you can really work well together? And how
Yeah.
much of that is great resume?
I don't think resume counts that much. Resume counts a little bit, right? Because you have to get through the door first. But after you get through the door, you have to go through the interview. And I think that's the real process where people start to see if you're the right fit. And I think that's really the same thing as any human relationships. You cannot predict if you're going to be, if you're going to click with the person, right? So I think most, in all of my H-1B visas that I've gotten, I had a good relationship with the hiring manager.
Absolutely. Yeah. It is about personal relationships first and foremost and the people skills.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely. Did you do anything to make yourself better at people skills the US way? Right? Because the communication styles are clearly different in China and in the States. Did you
Yeah.
study something? Did you prep in some way?
I think I didn't do anything intentionally, but I think it helped when I went to a university without many international students. My college was
Hmm.
very American. So I was one of the very few international students on campus. And as a matter of fact, I was the only international student in most of my classes. So
Oh,
it felt like, I had to be a part of it. Otherwise, I'll be the only weird person who doesn't participate in anything, right? So I think that definitely helped. 4 years of that experience helped me integrate more into American society. And then the other thing is, emotional intelligence, right? Like that does translate cross culture. So if you have that in one culture and then you're an intuitive, observant person, you can pick up on a lot of things. And if you are an open-minded person, if you're someone who's not going to stick to one thing, you don't have, pre-existing belief that, oh, I believe this is right, I believe that's right, so I'm not going to change, I'm not going to listen to anybody else's. I'm not like that. So I'm very open in absorbing any ideas that I may have not come across before. So I think, all of the factors that I just mentioned helped.
hmm. And did you did you notice any specific differences in the communication styles between China and the US?
Yeah, that I think we could write a book about it. Yeah, there's there's so many things. Yeah, I think it's interesting because one of the biggest differences, it's very contrarian because traditionally we think that Chinese culture is very reserved. It's we're polite, right? But I find it to be the opposite. So
Hmm.
in modern Chinese society, the communication style is very direct. So most, I mean, even in mainstream comedy, right? Like when there's an Asian comedian, all of the anecdotes was, they're about how direct Asian parents are, how we're raised with verbal abuse, which is true. So I
Right.
think that's one thing. We don't have the nicety, like the fake niceness, that type of stuff going on. So I feel like that part is a stark contrast compared to American culture. There's a lot of, fake niceness. I don't know if that's the right word. It's indirect, right? Like there are a lot of corporate lingos, for example, that you have to weave through and really understand, like read between the lines and understand what it really means. But I think in our culture, in modern Chinese society, it's so different. Like we're much more direct. So I think that's one of the biggest things that I observed.
That is so interesting. We've always been taught that China is the high context culture, right? Where you have to read between the lines and see the signs. And the
Sometimes,
US is more like a low context culture, but you're
right.
observing the very opposite.
Exactly. I think we also have to be just mindful of the nuance. I'm not saying that in any situation, in all
Right.
situations, that China is very direct. There's none of those like high contact scenarios. Yes, absolutely. But I think it's just like an everyday experience. For example, I noticed, just a lot more of compliments being thrown around in America in interpersonal
Hmm.
relationships, like, oh, you look really nice today, and like I like your shoes, right? Like things like that. In China, I feel like we just don't do that, right? Like when we meet someone new, we just say, oh, hey, hello, how are you doing, right, today, right? Like, did you eat? Something like that. We just
Right.
don't
Did you
throw
eat?
out compliments like that. And in very many scenarios, we would think that's fake if someone says something like that to us. Yeah, it's just because
Do
you
you
don't.
think it might? Sorry, go ahead.
No, no, actually, you go ahead.
Okay. So, do you think it might be due to the sort of learned mental effort in the United States to see positives, right? You're
Mm,
kind of running your brain and scanning for, okay, what's something positive about this person that I could like right away?
it is possible. You know what? I've never thought about it. Yeah, I always I find it fascinating that there are a lot of small talks in the U.S. or in English-speaking countries that I find hard to understand why that's necessary. For example, a few weeks ago, I actually posted on my own personal Instagram that in the U.S. in the grocery stores, the cashier always asks you, "How are you doing? Did you find everything you need today?" And I thought, how strange. Like, why would I be checking out if I didn't find anything? And then an American friend of mine replied back to me and he said, well, that's because they're trained to be nice to customers. They want to find something to talk about. And that's one of the things from the script that they've been told to talk about with customers who you know nothing about. And I thought, yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. But you know what? I feel like in a lot of other societies, we just do things right. Okay, you're checking out. I'm going to check things out for you. Like I don't care to
Hmm.
make a small, to make any kind of small talks with you. So yeah.
Right. How did you become so fluent in English, spending only a few years here in the States? Because I mean, I talked to a whole lot of recent immigrants or international students who have been in the States for maybe 3, 4, 5 years. And I would
Yeah.
say, and when we met, I think that's when you were, right? At that
Hmm.
point, you were either finishing or just finished your schooling, and your English was outstanding. I remember being really, really impressed. So, how do you think you got to that point?
Oh, so are you. Your
Thank you.
English is perfect. Well, I've started to self study when I was 11. When I first
Hmm.
came across Harry Potter again. My childhood hero. And I think really it helps to be very interested in another culture. So at the time, because I was very immersed in the book series, I feel like every time I like something, I want to know everything about it. I want to know about the culture, about the language. So I immediately took it upon myself to do the self studying because I know what we're being taught at school is not enough, right? So I think your interest really first and foremost plays a huge factor. The other thing is when we were in school, I think we have more time. We definitely have more time than compared to being an adult. You have so many responsibilities. As a child, if you're from a family that's you have, providers for you, then you don't need to do anything. You just sit there, get fed, right? You don't cook usually, and you just go to school. So I spent a lot of time during my lunch break to study
Hmm.
English, study another language. And I feel like that consistency really helped as well. And then the third factor is something that I don't think a lot of people talk about. You can be fluent in any language if you put enough effort in it, but not everybody can sound like a native and, talk in a near native level. And that's okay. It's not something that you need to achieve. But I think, for like if you want to integrate more into a society, then you definitely need to sound more like them as much as possible. So I think with those factors, like, there's one factor you cannot control, which is the talent, but everything else you can control by having a strong interest and putting consistent effort into it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Wow, this is some really useful piece of advice, definitely for the newer immigrants, for sure.
Mhm. Yeah.
Do you have any kind of specific study routines that help you, that work for you,
In terms of languages,
in terms of languages or
yeah.
anything? But languages, I guess, is a little particular because there's so much memorization.
Right. I think, I certainly do. And this is no secret because if you look at a lot of language YouTube videos, a lot of people talk about it as well, is once you start learning learning something, you need to practice, right? It's not a passive skill. It's always an active skill that you need to embed into yourself as if it's, muscle memory. So what I did before was I started talking to myself as if I was a crazy person. But yeah,
Hmm.
I had to practice with myself because it's not always possible to practice with someone who speaks the language. One, because you may not have access to resources like that. And then second, most people who speak their language, they would not have the patience or time to practice with a beginner. So if you are
Right.
still a beginner or even intermediate, you need to practice with yourself. And that's totally
Hmm.
doable with so many videos, articles and textbooks available nowadays. The choice is yours, but I think everyone absorbs languages or other type of knowledge differently. So you need to understand how you absorb the knowledge better, right? For example, for me,
Right.
a lot of people can't believe that I learn best from a textbook, right? Most people, they hate textbooks. They're like, oh, let me try to find some other way to make my language learning more fun. Maybe I should watch more TV shows. For me, yes, I do all of that as well. But I understand that I learn something best if I already know the ground rules, right? Like I need to learn the grammar first. I need to learn basic vocabularies first before I feel comfortable doing anything else. But may not work for you. So that's why you need to know yourself, know how you learn.
Right. I think you're a unicorn in that. Very much so.
Right.
Really.
I'm old school. Yeah,
Yeah, for most people, the opposite approach works, right? First,
exactly.
you listen and you watch, and then you go to the book to see the ground rules, how they apply
Mhm.
being applied there.
Yep.
Wow, amazing! A piece of advice for somebody who just came to the country, speaks another language, and is trying to adapt quickly.
I think, first of all, forcing yourself to speak in any situation, that's probably rule number one. I'm currently in Italy and I'm learning Italian, and it's the same thing, right? At certain point, you just have to force yourself to speak because no one else speaks your language. You don't have a choice. I think that's the number one rule is to really force yourself to speak. Then the other step is you need to learn the rules a little bit, right? Like if your sentences don't make any sense, then it can't work in the long term, right? Like you could just talk about a few words and nobody would understand the whole meaning. So I think just picking up those basic language skills as you go out and socialize with people, it really works because most of the time, if you're in a local community that they're not fluent in your language, then whatever effort that you make, most people are happy to receive it and they will help you as much as they can. So really it comes with time, and every day I would say spend at least 15-20 minutes consistently, and even within months you'll see a huge amount of results. And I definitely feel like the most challenging thing, if you're an adult now, though, it's how do you force that 10, 15, 20 minutes of time into your routine? Because
Hmm.
most of us can't even do that nowadays, right?
Right, right. Especially with so many interactions not being in person anymore. Right. So
Exactly.
unless you have a dedicated party online somewhere, you don't even get to interact somewhere outside of
Exactly.
the computer.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. How do you deal with embarrassing moment? Was that ever embarrassing moments? Was that ever a problem when you say something and it's completely wrong and nobody understands? Was that ever an issue for you mentally?
Luckily for me, no. I think I didn't make any, any mistakes that are more like grammatical, but I definitely made mistakes when I used a word wrong in the wrong context. For example, and also it's more nuanced sometimes because even if you know what a word means, right, from the dictionary standpoint, you may not know how to use it correctly in the cultural context. So I remember when I
Right.
was a sophomore in college, I was in a screenwriting class and I wrote something about Oriental. Like I used the word Oriental. And it's funny because I feel like I could use the word I'm Oriental.
Right.
And then the professor who graded my papers, he said, well, it's not really politically correct to use this word anymore.
Hmm.
And I was very confused. I was like, oh, what do you mean? Like, it doesn't mean like I'm from the East, you know? So
Which
then
means you're a rug.
exactly. Then I looked it up online and it started to make sense. I was like, oh, interesting. This is very nuanced, but good to know.
Okay.
Yeah. So
And
I
some of
didn't
it is just a cultural debate type of thing, right?
exactly, exactly. It's not
Right.
so much about, oh, wow, I said something completely wrong. It's mostly about, okay, I used it maybe in a slightly different way than most people expected to use it. But most of the time, I don't feel too embarrassed. I think it also has to do with the fact that I grew up in a culture where criticism is rampant. So
Hmm.
I
You
think
just
most
take it and move on.
exactly. I think most Chinese children have heard more criticism than praises, right? Like growing up.
Hmm.
So it's embedded into our mentality that this is normal. So embarrassment is less, well, I'd say it has less effect on me personally. Yeah.
Does it feel like when you get criticism that sometimes it comes from the place of caring instead?
It does. Well, most of the time it is from a place of caring. Sometimes it's not. I can definitely
Of
tell the
course.
difference. But I would say once you learn that, how you handle things is more important than what it is, right? It's then I started to develop this mentality that if I let something hurt me, then I'm the only person who's getting hurt. It's not really, basically, it's my responsibility to handle it. The world can throw everything at me, but how do I react to it? Do I get offended by everything, or do I choose to not care and really focus on myself? I think I've grown to do, just the latter. Like I want to focus on myself, especially when you go out and do business, right? Like if you're in the public eye, this is a critical skill because you're going to hear so many terrible things said about you. Like I have no interest of being a celebrity, obviously, but let's say you start going out there, speaking at conferences, you create some content, you write something online, and people comment. If you take every negative comment to heart, you're not going to live. So yeah.
That's a very useful insight for sure for everyone. Wow. Well, no wonder you are where you are with this kind of views. Right. Let's talk a little bit about how you got to where you are, and I want to focus a little bit on the immigration aspects of it because you received what is known as the Einstein visa,
Yes.
right? Tell us a little bit more about what it is and how you decided to get one.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm not nearly as good as Einstein. Let's just make that clear. But it's a funny kind of, title that people put on it, and it's even funnier what it is being called officially. I believe, it has something to do with
Extraordinary
extraordinary
achievement.
ability for
Yeah.
aliens, right? So
Aliens
we're
with extraordinary
aliens,
ability. Yeah.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So we're from Mars, but Well, joking aside, I decided to get it because I wanted to stay in America long term, and have getting a green card is the only way to do that. And I know I'm not getting married anytime soon at the time, right? So I thought, okay, what else is available? It's either getting sponsored by an employer, or you achieve something really extraordinary and sponsor yourself. So I actually went the easier way first. I asked my employer at the time if they wanted to sponsor me. And their answer was not no, but not a yes. So
Mm-hmm.
I thought, okay, I don't have time for this. I don't have time for not yes, but not no, right? So I need to move forward. Then I was left with the other option, which is how can I achieve something in my field and sponsor myself? So then I started doing research. I believe most people, don't even do the research, right? Like they would hear something and then people tell them, oh, it's really difficult, blah, blah, blah. It's always beneficial to do some research first and don't believe everything you hear. So that's what I did. I actually went on to lawyers' websites, right? And then I look up the case studies that they put on their websites. And I studied the case studies and I started to see some similarities. And I started to see that, wait a minute, it's not as unachievable as I had thought, because I've heard that you need to be an Olympian, you need to have won an Oscar, and I'm nowhere near any of those, right, achievements. But I've seen real cases that are not like that, right? They're just at the top of their respective field. That's not in entertainment or sports. Then I thought to myself, wait a minute, they look like real people that I could become. So I started writing what they did, right? Like what kind of awards they received, and what kind of achievements they've done. And I started to see if I could model that to my field. So that's how I got started, really. It's by doing research and seeing that it is possible. Then I started to believe that I could also do it.
And so you started going after all those awards and achievements, and that was on top of working a regular job, right? Where you also had to be an employee above average.
Exactly. Yeah. But luckily, the work environment was not toxic. So we did have reasonable work-life balance, right? So during work, yes, I had to work, but after work, I could focus on my personal, award-winning activities, I would say. So I definitely used all of my personal time to invest in uh, put drafting a strategy for myself. How could I achieve something like that in the next couple of months? So I did. As a designer specifically, I think it also has this benefit of being in a field that encourages this type of achievements, right? Like, because if you're in certain fields, I don't think it's as easy to do that, right? In certain fields, there's just no such things as winning an award or, being a judge somewhere, speaking or exhibition, right? So in a creative field, it's, our field is more prone to that type of thing. So I think it's also another factor as well.
So the way you worked as you designed a plan did you have several plans, like for like a long term for a year and then broken down into months, or was it just 2 months and we see where we are, 2 months and we see where we are?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely don't have a 1 year plan. I'm more like, let's roll with the punches. I'm going to do this and that next and see where it goes. And that's exactly
Mm-hmm.
what I did. That's why, also, this may not be relevant, but that's why I hate the question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I don't know.
No clue. Right.
Exactly. Well, first of all, I hope I'm still alive and very healthy. I think that first. But going back to the topic, it really is because you know the ultimate goal, right? Like you kind of know your goal, but you cannot possibly foresee how it's going to happen every step of the way. That's unrealistic. So instead of planning to that extent, I know what has to be done immediately. It's sort of like project management, prioritizing what's most urgent. And to
Mm-hmm.
me, from my research, I know the most urgent thing is how can I come up with something that would allow me to win some awards? Because it seems like awards has the most weight in the
Wait.
decision,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's what I did exactly.
And what were your days like when you were in pursuit of these awards? Like, how did you structure your time? And did you have to make any major sacrifices at that time?
I always, well, I think I've been a workaholic for most of my life, as I'm sure you are. But I don't think I had too much sacrifices other than I don't think I had a lot of fun, a lot of hobbies at the time, because really after work, I had to work on my award. I have to work on my own thing. There's no time to play tennis, for example. There's no time to really go socialize. So I think those are the sacrifices that I made. Doesn't mean that I didn't have any type of fun, right? I still find time to enjoy myself, but it's greatly reduced. But most of the time, I would say I just treat it as one of my other projects. It's as if I was freelancing, right? Like moonlighting as a freelancer, but I was not getting paid. So that's pretty much it.
It was a delayed gratification kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I remember once we met for dinner one of those years, and you mentioned that you were sleeping maybe 4 or 5 hours a night, right? And that's how much time you had to sleep. So, how did you make it work? How did you still function?
I feel like I may have sacrificed some sleep, but I was never pushing myself to the extreme. So I definitely still make sure that I was sleeping enough, maybe not quite that much as I wanted. I also I don't drink coffee or anything because I'm allergic. So most of the options available to everybody was not available to me. I'm very much the type of person that if I have just enough, then I'm fine, right? So it's not like I needed to sleep 13 hours a day. I don't think anybody does, right? So I think power naps definitely help. Like if you need to nap,
Hmm.
definitely naps. I actually was. I guess I also have been. I was a pretty energetic child. I remember when I was. Well, I didn't actually remember. I was told that I was the only child in the kindergarten who did not sleep when I was
Mm.
supposed to nap. so, so I think if I work on something that I really believe in, that I really like, I I become more energetic. Yeah,
But it's different if you don't really like something, it's just something you have to do. You
absolutely.
revert to your normal person mode.
Yeah, I would just be like, "Oh, let's get it over with." Yeah, yeah, definitely.
And how long did it take you, this pursuit of the extraordinary ability visa?
Actually, not very long, and I surprised myself as well. It only
Hmm.
took a few months. I would say maximum four months. It was pretty easy in the beginning, I'd say, because I won 6 awards one after another, which also exceeded my expectation. And I think it's also really just because of how I observed, how I really make sure that I studied it before I do anything. And I have
Hmm.
to remind myself too, like nowadays, I really have to spend time studying something before doing anything, right? Because when I started to create work to submit for awards, I make sure to study past award winners. I want to learn why they won these awards, right? What calibers they are that I could mimic, that I could reach that level. So I kind of, I was very strategic when I do something because first of all, I found out that most award winners, their work is a bit outlandish looking, right? It pops and it
Hmm.
has something quirky, cool about it. You can have something that's good for a corporate context. You just can't submit something like that. It doesn't stand out. It's very much like entertainment, right? Like if you're good enough, nobody cares. But if you're great or if you're like super, super quirky, someone will dig that, right? So I make sure that I
Hmm.
use that strategy. Actually, I created a website as my award-winning submission, and it doesn't make any sense in any business context, but it's so quirky, it's so funny, and it's beautifully designed. It worked. Yeah. It's a
So
different strategy.
you're very judicious in how you spend your resources, and you do a lot
Exactly.
of prep. Right? It's
Exactly.
like, what was it? Was it Lincoln who said, "If I have 6 hours to cut a tree, I will spend the first five sharpening the axe."
Exactly. Well, I
Something
did
like
not
that.
remember that, but I guess I was using similar strategies. Yes.
Amazing. Okay, only 4 months though. That's
Yep.
quite. I didn't know that. I didn't know that it was only 4 months. That
Yeah.
that is wow, mind blowing. Really, really. All
I was,
right.
yeah, I surprised myself. So yeah, definitely.
Well, that's a cause for surprise for sure. But then you took it further, right? Not only did you get those awards and those visas, but you also started a business, right?
Hmm.
Which is design school, and business coaching as well,
Yeah.
right?
Designs.
Why did you decide to do that?
So after I took care of my status, I could legally start a business, right?
Hmm.
And actually, I had never thought about starting a business until I I started to pursue the green card, because before I've always been of the mindset that I need to get a good job in a field that I love, and maybe I'll enjoy this life with stable job and family, right? That's been really the ideal that's grilled into us. But I guess my real personality shined through in this process, because I made all this effort to move to another country all by myself, and I worked very, very hard to get to where I was. I was not going to be I guess, like an ordinary person, if that makes
You were
sense. Like,
done with
I,
that.
right, I want more, right? So I
Hmm.
think it's the desire that I've always had to do more, to achieve, that now it started to make sense that, hey, I've already had a job before. I've already done a lot of things. It doesn't feel like me. It doesn't feel fulfilling. What is going to be fulfilling is having the ultimate freedom to do what I want. And I think that's at the point that I really started to think, what am I about, right? Because everyone has something that they're about, and I understand that, just comparing my life with my friends' lives back home, right? Like my best friend back home, she loves the stable, simple life. And I love her, right? Like I love her little simple life. But I was so different. I I love a crazy life. so once you understand that about yourself, then you need to know that, then you will know what you need to do. And then I understand, okay, my only calling is to start a business, because that's the only chance that I will have a crazy life that I enjoy. Right. So so I think that's really simple. It all boils down to who you are as a person, your personality. So that's how I started the business journey.
Hmm. On your website, there is a slogan. I believe it's yours. Those who love building the future teach. Maybe it's not yours. I don't know, but
It
it's there, right? And
I
it's
came up with it. I don't know who said
you
that
came up.
before.
Okay. Okay. Right. So, what do you want to teach?
I have found that I was, I really enjoy making a difference. I really enjoy helping people. And that's the one thing that I was missing working a corporate job. I was getting a very nice paycheck, having a very nice life. I bought property with my paycheck, right? Everything was nice, but I was not making a difference, because if
Hmm.
you work especially at a big company, you don't have any say in the outcome of a lot of projects, and you just feel so insignificant. And I care more about people than that. So I started to look at, channels where I can help people. And I started teaching after going to a conference as a speaker in Canada. And I learned that the best way to become a better speaker is to teach. And I started teaching really simply because of that, not because, like, oh, wow, I want to help people teaching. It was not that. I was not connecting the dots yet.
It was
I
all
simply
selfish.
wanted to.
It wasn't for
Exactly.
me.
It was very selfish. I was trying to improve myself, right? So then I started the teaching journey, and more that I realized, wait a minute, one, I really enjoy it. And second, I'm not terrible at it. And then third, I started receiving thank you notes that I
Hmm.
am sure is not required, that I have never required any thank you notes from them. And people feel, that they want to send me something. And it's very heartfelt. And whenever I see that, I thought, wow, I'm finally doing something that people really, like, it really helped them. And it feels
Hmm.
very fulfilling. right? So then after that, I thought, okay, I had no idea what I wanted to start my business in. I was exploring some ideas. Maybe I start from here, right? Maybe I start from here. So that's how it started. When you combine what you're good at, what you like, and what's your true calling, then you start to see some possibilities for ideas
Hmm.
that will lead you to a business.
So it was not a quick realization that you need to be doing this. It was sort of like step by step, different exploration
I
of
think
different
it's
aspects of
very,
your
yeah, it's very
personality.
simple. It's
Hmm.
very simple because I think, every time we encounter a problem, a crisis in life, we want a quick solution, right? We want things to just be back to perfect, back to normal. And I don't think that's realistic because every time we have to trust the process. Like I know we've heard of this a million times, like trust the process. What does it even mean? It
Hmm.
means that you need to relinquish your desire to know the future immediately. You need to
Hmm.
give up the comfort zone in your heart that you desperately want to crawl back in. And that's something that I learned along the way, that I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how much money I'm going to make, if I'm going to make anything, but something tells me in my heart that this is what I'm drawn to. Then let's explore it. So that's how I
Hmm.
did it. Really, it's I try not to think too much about it, but if something calls me, like in my heart, it's called intuition, right? Sometimes.
Right.
And
Gut
we
feeling.
have been taught to not trust our intuition. And time again, it has proven that it's absolutely incorrect. Like we have to trust our intuition. Yeah.
Right. Wow. The people you're teaching, where do they come from? What walks of life are they coming from?
They
If
come
you
from
can
everywhere.
characterize
Yeah,
everywhere.
so I'd say, because I started a UI UX design school, and most people who come to my school, they wanted to change their career. They want to have a better future, right?
Hmm.
And I'd say, it's very interesting to see people from different fields wanting to be in your field. And
Hmm.
it's also fulfilling to know that what you're doing can really make that happen for them. And nowadays, I'm not doing this alone. I have a co-founder. I have a team of instructors, and it is really, also I really enjoy hearing their stories because every students who come through the door, we interview them first. We don't let them sign up immediately, just because we want to
Hmm.
make sure that it is the right fit, right? They're actually going to get something out of what they're paying for. So every time I ask them what brought you here, and they tell you all these stories, I love connecting with people,
Hmm.
this way, and it's what makes this really fun.
Yeah, the stories.
Hmm.
That's. I'm sure you get a lot of insight in what's going on, basically, in a lot of people's lives and possibly in the society too, in
Yeah,
general, through
yeah.
these stories. Hmm. Okay, so we've talked about what makes you a successful, driven person. Do you have any qualities that are hindering you?
Absolutely. Yes. I know
Mm.
for a fact that my tendency to make decisions really fast has
Mm.
brought a lot of mistakes into my professional and personal life, both.
So intuition,
So,
huh?
yes. Well, actually, I would clarify that's not my intuition that's doing the wrong. It's my tendency to execute really fast. That is a double edged sword.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the good side is I'm very effective. I do things really fast, right? Like I can carry on a project, I can make that happen, no problem. But at the same time, I have used the same mentality and it has caused me to fail at a lot of things, right? Because sometimes there are some factors that I need to think about it a little bit more. It's really about striking a balance. It's not about, right? Like if you go the other extreme, you're overthinking, you don't do anything, you think too
Right.
long, then you miss the opportunity. But I was the other extreme. I thought of something, I didn't think it through yet, and then I
Rush into
executed.
it.
Exactly. So I think that's the number one mistake that I've learned that I have been working on to get better at. Yeah, that's definitely my
And when you're
mortal
working
sin.
on something, what does it mean for you? Do you just analyze your decisions or do you do any kind of therapy type of stuff?
I think it's more about being aware. The
Hmm.
awareness is, I think, in a lot of situations, awareness will help you go a long way because once you are aware, then you know you have to tell yourself to stop or pause when you encounter a situation like this again. I think it's just like that mental awareness, right? Like, wait, this feels familiar to last time. How about I slow down, right? I don't think I
Okay.
needed therapy in that department. It's the awareness, yeah.
So, do you do anything to increase your awareness, or you just sort of think a little more?
I think I think a little more. I remind myself what happened last time, and I don't
Hmm.
want that to happen again. I think that's already powerful enough. It's the negative
Mm,
consequence that you've already experienced that you
experience.
have aversion to. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right. So, what's next for you?
Well, I am very much pivoting my career a little bit now.
Oh,
I'm very much running my design school business, but right now we're trying to make the business more automated, more streamlined, and effective because most of our product development work has been done. And although it needs maintenance, it needs improvement, but I would say the heavy lifting is done. And now we want to maximize efficiency, right? Hopefully using technology and really just operational efficiency to make sure that everything runs more efficiently without a lot of human involvement. And then the other side of it is I want to spend more time developing my personal brand, which I have built, but I haven't really poured in everything that I have because I have received feedback that most of our students and really whoever comes through the door to become a customer, a client of myself or my company, they came through because of me, right? Like they like who I'm about. They read an article that I wrote before, but I stopped writing that, like a few years ago because I was so busy running my company. So hearing all these feedback, it makes me think that, wait a minute, why am I not putting more effort in areas that people actually find benefit in, like, that they believe in? So I wanted to write more articles, create more content, and then see where that leads me, like what kind of synergy that could bring to my business. So yeah.
your articles are fascinating. Yeah, when I was doing the research, I really just at some point I was doing what you said was like the wrong thing. I was just reading and
Yeah.
researching and kind
Yeah.
of like waiting to start putting questions on paper, like
Yeah.
because they
Yeah.
were just so interesting, definitely. And you have a lot to say coming from modern
Right.
China,
It's
essentially.
also because I think I have always loved storytelling. I think storytelling is the single most beautiful thing that we can do as human beings because I really don't think AI is going to replace our soul and in any time in even foreseeable future because yeah, I mean AI can do a lot of things, right? Like it can be even more perfect than what we do, but I don't see our human souls like being one recreated or create something original. So I think storytelling is that soul that I want to amplify. I don't want to lose. Yeah.
Have you ever thought of writing fiction?
Uh, no, actually, I enjoy reading fiction, but I really don't think that's my thing. Like my thing is rooted in my experience, in what I observe, and that's why as I grow older, I actually become more and more interested in nonfiction and documentary,
Hmm.
compared to fiction. Like fiction is an escape, right? Like it is larger than life, and I think there's so many people who are great at it because they have such ability to combine imagination with real life. But for me, I feel like I thrive in those like memories in kind of telling stories as it is from my perspective. So I guess no, that's not my place.
No, it is quite fascinating just what we see in everyday life.
Hmm.
Definitely, especially when people open up to you and
Yeah, yeah,
tell you about their stories. Hmm.
exactly. I love that. Hmm.
Yeah. Anything else that you would like to mention and discuss that I have not asked you about?
No, I think you asked a lot of really great questions, and I hope your audience finds it interesting. I really enjoy speaking to you, and honestly, I think how we met was also just very interesting. How it feels like yesterday that we just met, but it's been so many years. And
It has.
I felt very lucky having met you.
Me too. It was at the beginning of the way for both of us, right? In a way. And it was really interesting how our lives developed from
Yeah.
there. And Stella, thank you so much. So much useful, very useful advice for anyone who wants us to succeed in different areas of life, really entrepreneurship, immigration, whatever it is. Thank you
You're
so much. So,
welcome. Thank you for having me.
Stella, okay, Stella Guan, The Path Unbound, the school, also a great YouTube channel. Also, check out the website. Fascinating stories there. Thank you.
Thank you.